Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Book. And we have our special guest tonight who is Dr. Anupama Hariharan. Welcome. And can you introduce
Thank you.
yourself to the watchers?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shri, firstly, for inviting me to this podcast. I'm very happy to be here today. Just very briefly about me, I'm a dentist by profession and I branched out into research several years ago. Ever since then, I have been working in the research scenario. And I'm working currently with a contract research organization also as an associate director. And my writing journey has been fairly new. It has started about a year and a half ago. That's it. But it's been quite interesting. It has been very eventful and quite encouraging also for me as an author. And that's how I think that kind of brings me my entire journey to where we are sitting today, having a podcast with each other. Yeah.
Okay, so you are a practiced healthcare professional and a
Yeah.
published author of three novels. Most
Yeah.
people can barely do one of those things. When did you realize you needed to do both?
My writing journey started in childhood itself. I was an avid reader and I used to write a lot of short stories and poems and other things. And many of these short stories and poems have gotten published also in e magazines and newspapers. In fact, I have a good number of poems published way as early as I think um what 2000 no in fact 1990 something. It got published when I was actually a kid. They got published in the newspapers, and there was a very beautiful compliment paid to two of us. They said you don't have to be Shakespeare, you don't have to be Kwama Junior or Anupama Hariharan. You can be a normal person and still post articles, and we'll post it for you. So they actually paired our names with Shakespeare. And I was quite surprised because that was the biggest compliment somebody could have paid me. And I was in school back then. And I was like, okay. So then I went on to get a scholarship from Pennsylvania, which was also quite sudden. Somebody recommended my name over there. Somebody sent, I had just made an entry, competition entry, and I got $250 as gift money out there. I got a scholarship for Pennsylvania University, but I never joined there because my parents always wanted me to go into medicine. So that's how my whole medicine journey also started. Well, I was good in sciences, so that's another bonus point that kind of qualified me to move into the whole science, side of the things. But I think my journey with writing and as an author never really ended. I was always fascinated with stories, fascinated with people, and even with my patients. It has been a wonderful journey with my patients as well. Understand what they're going through, be there for them more as a human being than as a doctor. Treat them more as human beings rather than as a disease. That was my motto really, and that kind of has carried through, completely. But what started my tryst with very serious writing was only about a year and a half back. And as I said earlier as well, it all started with one single statement from my mother: "Why don't you write? You will do well." "तू लिखती क्यों नहीं?" That was what she asked me, and I was like, what's gotten her today, and I was like, "Mummy, TV dekho na," that sort of thing, I don't have time to write right now. Kaha, between hospital visits and home, I don't have time to write. But unfortunately, as I said, she passed away in August that year. 2025 February. That same sentence rung true because I was cleaning her cupboard. I hadn't touched it, from the time of her death, and when I actually cleaned it, that whole conversation came rushing back to me. Really, my journey has started from there. My actual journey with writing, I would say, as a serious writer, as a serious author, started from 2025 February. It's not been too long. It's been what, a year and a half right now, and it's been very fulfilling. At times it has been very tiring. At times it has been an eye opener of sorts. I met a lot of people who cheated me also along the way. They said they would render services and didn't, and those were the sad bits. But I guess if you're moving into something, if you're jumping into something, you have all kinds of people that will make a wholesome experience for you. So I take it positively, and I've kind of moved forward with that. With those experiences.
Okay, I'm very sorry to hear about your mother, and it's kind. It can be a really tough time when you started writing
Yeah.
and remembering her as well.
True, true,
Okay.
true. It was to channelize your grief is one thing. There were two pathways in front of me. One, I could have gone over the deep edge and gone into depression and probably had to take years and years of therapy. It's possible because grief does that to some people. But inherently, being a doctor, having seen that side of the story quite a lot, having seen patients suffer, it also helps you at some mental level to cope with these things. I coped with my father's passing way back in 2004. It was a lot harder for me at that point because I was much younger. As you grow older, it's not like you lose your affection for your parents or anything. It just gets even tougher, actually, with all of your other, responsibilities and liabilities and everything. It actually gets tougher losing a parent. But I decided to channelize my grief, thinking that I always remember my mother saying that after my father passed away, she was like, बहुत रो लिया हमने, खड्डा तो ऑलरेडी खोद दिया हमने, अभी इतना और तो नीचे नहीं जा सकते ना, देयर इज ओनली वन वे नाउ अप. You already dug a hole. The hole is dug. You can't dig further. You have to move only up. So if you think of it from that perspective, we all laughed at that, because that was a very weird thing to say at that point. You dug a hole, now you have to move forward. It wasn't very encouraging. But when I think of it from a realistic perspective, you've already been in the abyss. You've already been in the pit. There is no other way. You have to come up only now. So I think I took that as a positive, and I was like, if she had been alive, she herself wanted me to write, right? So I will be honoring not just my wishes, but her wishes as well, in giving wings to my talent. So I think that is what really got me started with the whole journey.
Okay. So Beyond Level was a bold debut, writing about LGBTQIA plus identity in the Indian literary space takes real courage. What was going through your mind the day you decided this was the book you were going to read? Right.
I had been toying with that idea for almost 4.5, 5 years. So it wasn't a new concept with me. I wanted to do something really meaningful in that space because by then I had already become a coach for the LGBTQIA community. I gave training to a lot of students, more as a as an ad hoc activity, because I love training, and these are all like free sessions that you give more from interest point of view, and then career counseling, because there are a lot of people languishing out there, within and outside of the community also, who don't know where their careers are going. They can take a drastic step. So what I did was, when I started looking at these stories, so many years ago I started all of these activities, and when I started seeing all of these people, um, students especially, who are closeted, who can't come out in society very easily, and from my own experiences also, having observed all of these, and even as a single woman, there are so many things that can happen to you that are not very good in society. Society treats you in a very stepmotherly or a stepsisterly or stepbrotherly way, whatever you call it. They treat you in a certain way. You become like that extra appendage that in society that it doesn't really recognize as a part of its own, not realizing that it's an integral part of society. So what happened was, I kind of started working in that space, and 2025 was when I decided, no, I need to be brave enough to now write about all of this. I can't be closeted any longer about the whole concept itself, and I need to bring it out into the public space. जो होता है देखा जाएगा. That sort of thing. I think that was the main reason. Yeah.
Okay, a lot of writers say their first book is the most personal. How much of Beyond Levels is Dr. Anupama?
Everything. Every character you see will have a shade of me. Every character you see will have some trauma that I have myself gone through, reflecting through them. They may not be direct this thing, they may not be, not the entire story may be mine, but one incident, one particular episode might actually reflect in each of them. For example, if you take Ananya's character, I'm not a very feminine character by nature. So for me, I always like to cut my fingernails short and things. So There's so many friends, who told me, "Tu nail paint क्यों नहीं लगाती?" There was a time and place when I used to enjoy that, but I actually had to, for that character, the way she applies her nail paint and how uncomfortable she feels dressing the way she is and going to the workplace and trying to move into the skin of somebody she is not. I wanted to experience that physically. So I sat in front of the mirror one day. My editor suggested, "Why don't you do that to yourself?" Sat in front of the mirror one day to see how uncomfortable I feel, because that's not me. And then I realized that this is perfectly the character that I should be writing. So I think, even if you ask me, whether these characters, how much of it is me, the whole book is me. Because it reflects shades of me everywhere. Even that discomfort that Ananya is facing in her particular role is also me. And that was the hardest character for me to write.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before the first book was published, was there fear? Did you almost not do it?
Yes, there was an inflection point where I felt, how are people going to accept it? आधा book तो हो गया अभी, whether this is really going to be accepted by people. Will I draw flack? Are there certain sections of society that are going to target me thereafter? All of these, thoughts, these are natural because you've seen a lot of people suffer, in our Indian society itself. But then I thought, if I'm going to be a coward and if I hide behind shadows, and if I'm never going to be able to have a voice and come out, and what am I doing? I'm not doing anything. I'm just representing myself through a book. I'm representing people through that book. I'm representing a concept through a book. How wrong can it be? And if people have a choice of not reading it, right? If you don't like a certain genre, you don't read it. And if you want to know reality of how people suffer through the whole this thing journey, read it. Right? So how will you know about people's journey? How will you know what matters in society and doesn't matter? What are some of the real topics that we talk about today, unless people don't represent that appropriately through their writing, through their book, emotions, etc. And then it's a matter of, whether people like it or not. It's up to them whether they want to pick up the book and read, really.
The Sound of Your Name is set in Chiang Mai, a tropical world far from where most Indian authors plant their stories.
Yeah.
Why Thailand? What does that setting unlock that an Indian backdrop couldn't?
Right. So I had already dedicated Beyond Labels and the entire series to the Indian setting. All right. Now, as an Indian author, people feel, it is challenging. Can an Indian author really write about characters that are foreign in nature? I mean, if foreigners can write about a lot of characters that are not from their setting, why can't an Indian? So that was my first thing. And the second thing is, when you sit on international dating sites, generally you have very few Indians out there. You will see a lot of foreigners only. So what I experienced out there on those dating sites really were foreign characters. I expected a lot more Indians out there, but then I realized that there are few and far between. That more or less, you've got a lot of people from Southeast Asia, you've got a lot of people from US, UK, Europe, especially, and even from Ukraine, Eastern Europe, especially. You find a lot of people from Brazil, South America, and then I was like, why do I restrict myself to just the Indian context? I've already started on a series that's entirely dedicated to the Indian context. Why can't I represent the dating scenario the way it is in the context of love, a love story, rather than it really being, restricted to a region or a place? So randomly, I think I've selected certain characters. Some are based in the US, and these are based on real life characters that I actually encountered on a dating site. Now they may not be exact replicas of that, because obviously, you can't have an identity reveal and all of those things. It's not nice like that. And what I've done is I've kind of played around with multiple characters and rolled that into one character. Now, why Thailand? It could have been any other place, really. I just found Thailand quite conducive, and it had that romantic ring. Chiang Mai had that romantic ring to it. So I kind of, went with the flow, and we selected that, and we added a slight Filipino angle also to that, just to make it even more romantic and mysterious. So I think it's the allure, that whole allure of a beautiful feminine Thai woman was something that and the fact that Westerners actually find that quite attractive, that exotic beauty. It could have been anybody. It could have been really a Filipino I could have selected. It could have been somebody from Malaysia. It just so happened to be Thai. That's it. There was no real thought process behind it. That whole Chiang Mai thing sounded very romantic to me. It's a very
Okay.
beautiful place actually, Chiang Mai. So I just thought it was perfect for the setting of the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fragments of Us just released in April 2026, and reviewers are calling it deep, emotional, and reading too deep. What was the hardest scene you had to write in that book?
I think the hardest was, how Priya, it's surprising really. People would think that the whole story about Ananya, Shreya, and all of these people, would be like a difficult thing to write, the whole plot and other things. But it was the IT bit, the technical bits, that were the hardest to write. So I have what we call as a project compass out there. When you read the book, you come across this entire plot called Project Compass. And then when the plot reveals itself, it's very hard to identify, to be a non-tech person really, writing about a tech concept. So I was quite wary. Am I going wrong somewhere? I actually spoke with a couple of tech guys also to, make sure that the plot is right, and borrowed some terminology from them, and then discussed it out with a lot of people to find out, whether this is going on the right track. So there's been a lot of R&D about the whole plot. It's not been easy writing a plot as complicated as that. I've had some help by way of an editor who's really been very helpful. She was quite instrumental in me conceptualizing the whole thing and making the whole flow right. So I've had a lot of help along the way to help me portray the whole book correctly. Because technically I wasn't from the author background. I've had no formal education as an author. I just started my journey with, I jumped right in. जो होता है देखा जाएगा, and let's see what happens. That sort of thing. So I got a lot of help, fortunately. A lot of people who advised me on how to go about it and helped me, format the whole thing. So I think the tech part of it was the most difficult in answer to your question, really.
Okay. Your books sit at this fascinating intersection: psychological complexity, LGBTQIA plus community, romance, and Indian womanhood mostly. Did you consciously set out to write in that space, or did the characters take you there?
Um, Initially, I didn't set out to make it complex, basically. But then I realized, you can't have a pot boiler without a complexity. You have to have the plot itself is complex. When you have so many lives involved, the whole plot becomes convoluted and complex. And how do you then, talk about how does it then interweave into each other? When you start interweaving things, automatically it becomes complicated. I mean, if I see my life itself, I have gone through so much right now from all of those decades. What I am today is as a result of all the complex scenarios that I had to face in life. It was not simple. So life is never going to be simple. It's always going to be differentiated. So to represent something in a very simplistic manner, say black and white characters and all, it would be fictitious. It would not reflect reality. So then I had to make the plot complicated. So what happened is, not quite by design. It happened quite by default, because when I started writing the characters, when we started conceptualizing the whole story, that was when the whole plot started thickening. And then we were like, okay, this can be one twist out here, this can be one turn, which logically kind of fits in the whole flow of things. So that's how the whole story got made, and quite by default, it has become, complex. The complexity holds a certain, it makes the narrative quite gripping, because you don't have any easy answers to any of the questions out there, and it's never going to be easy. If it was so easy, half of the problems that happen in this world today wouldn't exist. But we know it doesn't, right? So we represent reality. We make it as complicated as possible. And then, how people navigate through those complexities, what are the stress levels that they have, what are their coping skills, all of these come out. And none of these are easy. All of them are difficult, really. The psychological part of it, Yes, there are several layers to psychology that you want people to be thrilled and surprised and disgusted with, and you want them to have those kinds of reactions when they're reading your book, because that is reality, right? In real life also, you meet so many people who can evoke certain reactions within you. And I wanted people to have a slew of reactions out there, not just be restricted to either awe or oh, I like it, I don't like it. No, you like it, you hate it, you love it. I want you to have the entire spectrum of emotions while reading that book. That's what makes it exciting, right? So,
Readers often say they see themselves in your characters for the first time. Can you tell us about a reader message or reaction that genuinely stopped you in your tracks?
I think the women writers, absolutely, the women who have reviewed the book, they resonate almost immediately with some of the problems that they may face as even single women. They didn't have to be part of LGBTQIA to experience some of the horrors that I've already mentioned in the book. Um, but what was the turning point for me was men who have reviewed the book and have given elaborate reviews of how they have faced something similar, even not being a woman, was the thing that surprised me the most. So that stopped me in my tracks, and I was like, okay, is this something that they could, I'm surprised and I'm touched that, and humbled even that they could resonate with this already, even being men, they could resonate with it. They could understand some of the things and they could appreciate the kind of fear, the psychological trauma, all of these things that the woman, faces at the workplace or whatever. And the surprising part that they could actually identify with some of these things that they could have happened to them. That was a really surprising thing for me. It made me think. Probably some part of their feedback I'm going to use to add in my third and fourth books also.
If someone has never read your work and they're listening right now, which book do you hand them first and what do you say to convince them?
I would hand them two books. One is Fragments of Us and one is Sound of Your Name. Because when I hand them Fragments of Us, by default they will have to read Beyond Labels. So I will not, hand that separately. I will tell them read Fragments of Us. So if they don't understand something, by default they will read Beyond Labels. Okay, then they'll get the entire flow. So that's in the Indian context. Now, if they want to read something more in the international context, and how things can be in from the whole dating scene perspective, which is quite pertinent to today's time and age. So if they want to read something that's really people's lived experiences, if they want to know what really happens out there and what a jungle it is out there in the dating scenario, take out the Sound of Your Name, have a go at it, read it, you will know exactly what happens out there. And it's an eye opener of sorts. I'm not preaching to anybody how they should be conducting their lives. It's just a representation of, it's just a storytelling, layered storytelling style in which I have represented the characters. However flawed they are, however good or bad they are, I have just represented them. That's it. So it's up to the reader to take what they want, up to the reader to understand that this is good for them or this is bad. That is up to them entirely. I am no one to interfere in anybody's life. I just write stories.
Walk us through a typical day or a week. When does the author, when does the doctor end and the author begin?
Oh, that's a beautiful question actually. And what my immediate answer is, both of them, I can't separate both. So the doctor and the author are the same individual. So I don't have any segregation point as such. The doctor side of the story and a researcher side of the story actually helps me organize my work a lot better when I'm writing, rather than being disorganized and this, giving the image of a crazy writer out there with one too many ideas and all. I like to put it in an organized way. What it does is it helps me see my ideas in an organized fashion, and it helps me, get that logical flow. So I think that that logic part of the story, that analytical skill set, the critical thinking that you need in research, that part of the story really helps when you're writing your plots. Is it logical? Will it appeal? You tend to do a lot of research before you actually dive into a topic. You don't tend to do it mindlessly. You will actually do a lot of R&D before you write something. Second thing is, communication bit. You use your communication from your writing, because I've written a lot of articles earlier. I had an inherent interest in languages and literature and writing and grammar and all of these things, right from childhood, I would say, because I've been conditioned a certain way at home. So that side of the story really helps you in the whole R&D process, because I deal with a large cross-cultural setup. So how do you deal with people in a cross-cultural setup? You have to have cross-cultural sensitivities. You have to have a lot of very sound communication skills that across borders people understand. So I think the literature part of it has honed my communication skills from a professional standpoint. So are they existing separately? Not really. They're actually blending very beautifully for me right now. And it's that same blend, of characters that I'm using, a blend of qualities that are needed for both, that come together seamlessly to make both the doctor and the author. Yes, the time I give to being an author is a little different from what I would give to my work.
Medicine teaches you to observe people, their pain, their fear, the things they don't say. How has being a doctor made you a better writer?
Um, you know, there are two sides to that coin. One, a doctor can become totally apathetic, in the sense they are seeing people in pain day in and day out, day in and day out. It just becomes a job after a certain point of time. Now, some doctors may not agree with me. Some are very passionate about their whole thing. They see that as their, entire, it's not just their bread and butter, it's their entire core, service oriented. So, to such people, maybe it doesn't appear, but to a lot of doctors, eventually what happens is they become apathetic. You know, they might not learn to distinguish between pain, a patient, and a disease. They will probably treat the patient as just another human being who's come in. Problem है, मुझे treat करना है. I have to give two दवाइज to them and they have to go. They'll get better. I'll have a follow up. I will do everything that a doctor is supposed to do just to make sure that they're okay. That's it. But there's no real connection out there. Okay, I have witnessed doctors like that also when I was studying to be a doctor. And what I always wanted to do was never to be a person like that. I didn't want to be somebody like that, because it works for certain people. They can dissociate themselves, and rightfully so sometimes, from emotions, because otherwise they will not be able to treat. For example, a surgeon, if they get too connected with their patient, they are not able to perform a surgery, right? Cutting a patient open is going to be virtually difficult for such persons. Then how are you going to save a life? So in some ways it works. In other ways, for example, for me, it didn't work. I was very connected. I was very emotional. Uh, there was a death, that used to happen in the hospital. I used to cry for days together, and it affected me pretty deeply. And I was like, is that the value of human life today? Does it boil down to just a theoretical discussion on, how to operate on a particular tumor or not? The person is a lot more than a tumor, right? वो सिर्फ tumor के हिसाब से अपनी, you cannot think of that person like that. Oh, if I use this technique, I can remove this tumor from them. If I don't use this technique, this is how it will affect. I don't know. I never wanted to be that sort of a doctor. So eventually, I wanted to move out into the research space to be able to contribute more. And this whole pain, actually, the pain and suffering that you see in patients, it helped me cope for my parents' treatment also. Because when my father passed away, I was very young. Then when my mother passed away, I'd gotten older by then. But the fact that your parent never really goes away. But what happens is that pain that you've seen in other people kind of conditions you to handle everything better. So while you see your parents suffering, you're able to handle that better. You acknowledge their pain. Okay, but you don't tend to internalize that completely, simply because it helps you deal with their pain. It helps you be brave in front of them. So I think all of these things really helped. How does it help you become a writer? Because when you're a writer, when you're working with multiple characters, you get into their emotions quite by default. You feel whatever they feel. Okay, and as a doctor, if you were able to feel people's pain, it's not very difficult for you to write the characters then, in that case. That sort of thing. Yeah.
Have you ever had a patient experience that found its way into one of your books, changed, fictionalized, but unmistakably real?
I think I've talked about the pain, but I've not really talked about patients per se. I've not represented patients for that matter. But what you could say is, I mean, if you look at people feel, whoever is part of LGBTQIA, till about a decade ago, people used to feel that these are patients with psychiatric issues. Identity, gender, dysmorphia, and I don't know what and all fancy terminology that people use. In simple terms, if you're not attuned to a certain gender, doesn't make you an anomaly. I think I stopped dissociating a long time ago the LGBTQIA with a disease. It's a natural part of who that person is. If that's how God has created one person in a certain way, if God has created the other person a certain way, it's the same God that's created everybody, right? If you're talking even in terms of religion, for that matter, if you're talking in terms of spirituality, the energies can be different. You talk about Ardhanarishwari, you talk about Shiva and Shakti in the same vein, but you're not able to accept LGBTQI concepts. I mean, it's like a no-brainer for me that you can accept one, but you can't accept the other. That's the biggest hypocrisy. We exist. That exists within our society. Biggest hypocrisy, basically. So I think, in that sense, if you think about it, I would say that yes, people used to treat such people as patients only at one point of time, right? There's the closest you will get to a patient experience in my book, basically. The psychological trauma part of it.
Has writing the books changed how you practice medicine? Has it made you a different doctor?
Um, in some ways, books make you think quite deeply because you do a lot of research besides medicine. So when you're thinking of everything in terms of molecules and atoms and ions and pharmaceutical ingredients, you boil it down to something that is a substance, basically a non-living substance. But when you're thinking of administering it to another human being in whom all sorts of reactions can happen, then it becomes real. Then it has a lot to do with how does it affect their overall well-being, and well-being has everything to do with emotions, right? So when you think about it from that perspective also, um, you know when you're stressed, there's a lot of chemicals also that circulate. Cortisol, particularly. Cortisol itself is a drug, and it's also a stressor in the body. So when you're writing, you tend to correlate these things automatically. So you don't have one existing without the other. And then when you're thinking about it, okay, under stress, oh, there must be so much of cortisol in that person. How is that person going to react? That fight response, or that amygdala control. All of these scientific facts actually play into some of the emotions that people have. I do tend to ask some of these questions to myself. And that doctor author thing blurs, that bar blurs somewhere it tends to merge within each other, and then it makes more sense actually why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Indian literary space has historically been cautious about LGBTQIA+, as we were talking. Do you feel that's changing, and what role do you think your books are playing in that shift?
Right. If you see earlier times, if I'm talking about thousands of years ago, I think we were far more evolved as a civilization, because we had every concept of LGBTQI included. We never differentiated people on the basis of, their, what do you call it, their sexual preferences mainly. We never differentiated people. We had a lot of people we used to describe. You have got queens and kings existing right from the 14th, 15th century, even in Europe, for example, who had concubines and all, who were, a queen having female concubines. You have males in Roman history. If you take the Roman Empire, you have a Roman king who had all male concubines. He used to convert them into, he used to make them dress like women, and he used to have several of them, that sort of thing. Now, I'm not justifying all of that. What I'm saying is it used to exist. It used to exist as a part of your normalized society, okay? And then you had the Mughals come into, you had cultural influences. Then you had British come in. The earlier 1860s British who brought in various laws, and then they were also responsible for outlawing an entire community that we call as a trans community, which is also known as a hijra community or the trans community. They outlawed them as criminals at one point of time, which was quite this thing. In you celebrate Shikandi in our religious texts, and your you call it mythology, but you celebrate characters such as that. You discuss Shiva and Shakti also as Ardhanareshwari, and you celebrate that. But then you have a big problem talking about the trans community, or you have a big problem talking about a woman falling in love with another woman, or man falling in love with another woman, or a person liking both genders. We know by nature, that non-binary or bi-curious people and all sorts of classifications that we have already existed in society. They were never classified under a DSM-5 classification as a psychiatric illness. They were never classified. They were always classified as your a part of normal behavior, a behavioral orientation that a person could have by birth. Okay, and it's a noted fact right now. Take any book that you have, medical book or whatever. No person can contest that it's a medical disorder. No person is able to contest that. Your psychiatrist today will tell you that it doesn't come under our purview. It happens to be a natural orientation by birth. Okay, so if you look at it from that perspective also, what I would say is, our original beliefs actually got corrupted over a period of time. They got corrupted. Just a second now, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, there's a lot of work going on at home, so I think that might have been causing a little
Oh,
of
it's okay.
disturbances. Yeah. All right. So I think when all of these practices started corrupting the original belief systems, I would say, is when you had you started outlawing everything. So what was natural suddenly became very unnatural. Suddenly became very unnatural. You take the Rigveda. Rigveda also tells you a particular statement is there where it says even the unnatural is natural. What you term as unnatural is also a form of natural only. There is nothing unnatural in that. So nothing in nature exists brainlessly. Nothing in nature exists just by coincidence. It exists by design. We've been created. Some people have that kind of orientation quite by design. Nature has selected a certain group of people to be born. Maybe, who knows the womb stressors, what kind of stressors might have been there at that, the womb environment. It also depends on the womb environment sometimes. I don't know. We have to do a lot of R&D on that. It might depend on that as well. How do you know? So, there's a lot of things that one needs to consider. So, it's a part of the natural process. And I think we need to naturalize these things rather than talking of them in terms of, oh, it's a taboo topic. Right from 1942, there was a Pakistani lady who was actually come out with very good books, Ismet Chugtai. She had written books for which she was, I think, jailed and all. Today, they are celebrated works because people realize that this is what they have been facing. A lot of people had, a dual liking. Basically, they liked even men and women. How do you describe that? How do you express yourself like that? If you're not able to express yourself, then all sorts of, you bottle up some feelings within you. They come out as stress. Somewhere they will come out as really violent reactions also in people. And there are people who have committed suicide also because they never had an outlet. So, is that natural? Answer me that honestly. Is that natural? Pushing a person to, off the edge by not allowing them to be themselves. And I'm not talking about being criminal, sir. I'm not talking about being a serial killer. That's an anomaly. That's criminal. That's absolutely criminal. That means some chemical locha in your brain, which will be the something you have to do about yourself. Treat yourself, or that's a plain what do you call it? A perversion that is set in. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a simple thing like love. It's not a criminal offense. Sorry, I'm a little passionate about all of these things, while talking about these topics. I feel very
It's
strongly.
really fun to actually hear your perspective.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Beyond Levels has the subtitles The Movement. That's a powerful word to put on a book cover. What movement are you trying
Yeah.
to be part of or start?
It's a thought movement. So it's not a morcha per se, it's not with placards and other things, it's a thought movement. It's a mindset movement that I want people to think. You can be sitting right in your house and thinking about all of these things and creating a movement by actually conditioning yourself first, by stating that I want to be more inclusive. It starts with you. You can say that to yourself that I want to be more inclusive. You go out with that mindset and you see how many lives you're able to touch by just being you. If you can do that, then it's a chain reaction, right? If you are kind to somebody else today, if somebody else notices that, they also notice, oh my god, despite my difficulties, this person has been so kind to me, so considerate. You look up to that person. What you do, you will try to emulate that. If it made you feel good, you try to emulate that, right? So when you do that, that person happens to they copy you. Once they copy you, it kind of spreads towards an entire community to become more tolerant. Okay, so basically what you're saying is you're more tolerant towards a person who loves another person. That's it. There is no nuclear arsenal, no gun, no nothing, no anomaly out here involved. It's just one person loving another person. How much of problem can the world have with that? I mean, it's ridiculous, how many debates we have had over that, and how we go to what lens to criminalize all of these things, and it baffles me, really. It baffles me.
You won the Superpower Author Award Honor of Excellence. What does recognition like that to you, especially for stories that mainstream publishers might have once been too nervous to champion?
Right. It's a victory of sorts. It's a tiny victory that I'm making the right noise in the right corners. And, my books are reaching a larger audience today. And they're making the right noises as well. People are understanding that I am not apologetic in my book at all. I have read literature that's terribly apologetic, that wants to give everything from society's perspective. I have given both perspectives without giving any excuses for them. The way society behaves and the way the LGBTQI community may behave. I have not apologized for either. It's just the way it is. So I have represented it. It's up to people to interpret what they want, to decide for themselves. So that will, we're all born with free will. The fact that we get to decide what we, as a message, what I take from that book. And is that message then worth it to, exponentially, then kind of extrapolate and pass it on to somebody else? That's up to you entirely. But I'm hoping that it starts that kind of thought process and that movement. Other than that, a medal or a shield has very little meaning for me until and unless it's able to do something more in society today. That way.
Okay.
So I think that's what it means
If
to me,
a
essentially. It's a
young
small win. Sorry, go ahead.
if a young LGBTQI plus person
Mhm.
in the small Indian town reads your book and feels seen for the first time, what do you want them to do with that feeling?
Um, Firstly, they should, discuss it with somebody. So, if I understood your question right, somebody understands that they are part of LGBTQI, correct? They get to realize that
Yes,
they are part of LGBTQI, and they want to discuss their feelings with somebody, correct? What do they do first?
yes,
Right. So, the first thing starts with themselves. If you feel it's an anomaly, the whole world is going to perceive you like that. Okay, if you feel something is wrong with you, the whole community will tell you that yes, whatever you are is wrong. If you're comfortable with understanding that this is how you're born, you accept it. Educate yourself with literature. Try and figure it out for yourself whether it's wrong or right first. Accept yourself. Once you accept yourself, once you know that you're also an integrated part of society and that you are nothing different, you know, it's just that you have a certain orientation and that's not really disturbing anybody else. As long as you don't have any perverted practices that you're using along with that, a pervert is a pervert, whether that person is a homosexual or a heterosexual. Okay, there is no gender or there is no religion or anything. It's a mindset, I tell you. It's a mindset that's associated with that. Let's segregate that from being, either a homosexual or a heterosexual. Now we are talking about we like what we have done is by law we have kind of categorized everybody as a criminal only. Such people are not criminals, you know. They are inherent part of society. You have to distinguish between such people. They're contributing to society. They're very creative people. I don't know. There may be a correlation between being LGBTQI and being extremely creative people. I have seen majority of the creative people who are there from various creative fields. They are there as a part of LGBTQI community only, right? A lot of them from the LGBTQI are extremely creative. Who knows? That might be a correlation out there. So can you say that that's really wrong? If they're churning out wonderful things for you today, something so creative and beautiful in society, how can they be wrong? You know?
Yeah.
And so you have to tell yourself that what I am is a product of my natural the way I have been born. This is who I am at birth. I have to embrace myself. If I can't embrace myself, I cannot blame others, right? I cannot blame others, basically. And then, yes, try and get help. Discuss this out. Go to forums that will educate your immediate family, that will educate you and your immediate family. Take those baby steps that will get you help. And take it one step at a time. It doesn't happen overnight.
Actually, that helps me with my perspectives too. Like when I found
Yeah.
out I was bisexual, it was really tough for me. I thought that was just a phase, but
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't. It was my sexuality when
Yeah.
I finally found out.
Exactly, and that's who you are. You have to embrace it, and embrace it with open arms. I mean, um, how rare is it for a person to feel so much for either of the genders, for equally for both the genders? How rare is it? Doesn't that make you unique? Does that make you a disease? You're not a disease. You're not an anomaly. When you look at yourself in front of the mirror, you should be able to see yourself as an individual, a wholesome individual, a complete individual who fits right into society by virtue of who you are, the way you're born, the way the society ought to have perceived you in the first place. You know, reach out to me. I would say I tell people, reach out to me. I'll put some sense into your head about who you are and how you have to accept yourself and things like that. I have struggled through that phase, and I'm very happy to help people come to terms with themselves.
Okay. Your you are three books in. You have
Mhm.
24,000 people following your story. You have won national awards. What does that version of Dr. Anupama 5 years old from now will look at you?
I think I want to look back at not a cupboard full of trophies and other things. I want to look at how far I have come as a human being also. How far have I evolved as a human being? Even on the emotional intelligence quotient, how far have I evolved as a human being? 5 years down the line, has it really helped me mature to that degree where, people now look up to me? Have I set a good example along the way? Are people looking up to me for something good? Have I learned from my mistakes along the way? That is also important. It's important to tell yourself that, to acknowledge those things also along the way. All right, and it's important to tell people where they're also making mistakes. It's a two-way street. You don't just allow people to tell you what is going wrong with you. You also should be able to sensitize them to what is not okay for you. So you should be able to sensitize both ways. It should be a good balance of sorts. And does that then make you a better human being? Are you able to write better stories? Are you able to express yourself through your books, your emotions? Is it touching lives, basically? Is it changing the way society thinks in a positive manner? I think that is more important for me. Medals and shields and other things, they will come and go. They will remain in a cupboard. I tell you, my parents' certificates, their achievements, everything is lying in the cupboard today. They are not there. The only legacy I am going to leave behind are my books. That's it, nothing else. All the shields and medals and all, they will lie in the cupboard. They're very nice while I'm alive. I enjoy them. Once I'm gone, nobody really cares. Right? It's only my legacy. It's my books that are going to live through the ages. Yeah.
Okay. To any aspiring authors listening right now, someone who has a story burning inside them but is scared or too busy or waiting for permission, what do you want to tell them?
Like if they want to start a book and they're procrastinating because of some reason. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, I think there is that turning point, you know. So, I feel a book chooses you as an author. Many a times the topics choose you because you fit a certain topic the best. You're probably the best person to write about that topic, so that topic chooses you rather than the other way around. I started out with the children's, series, children's book series, and I ended up writing something else altogether. So you can imagine. I never thought in the wildest dreams that I would be writing something on a dating site because it's not my genre. Coming from a scientific background, I would have never imagined myself writing something romantic or mushy, you know. And I always thought of myself as a very pragmatic person, not as a very romantic, sorts. Then I found myself writing about these things one fine day, and I was like, okay, the book chose me, the topic chose me. So I think that time period, and when it starts dawning on you, you get all the signals. You know, you start having more ideas. You start getting dreams, probably, you know, that are appropriate to what you're planning to write. You start getting, you get that zeal automatically from inside to write something. All of these things happen when you're about to write, and when the time is not right, you don't end up writing. I tell you, when you don't have that creative juice flowing through you or that creative motivation flowing through you, you just can't write. You just can't write. But when it happens to you, catch it at that point of time. Don't put it off for tomorrow, because tomorrow will never come, and you have to do it today only. That's all I can say,
And
basically.
question,
Yeah.
which is, what's the one thing you want every person who listens to this episode to do? One action, one thought, one shift before they go to sleep tonight.
Okay. What I want people to do is have compassion, develop empathy skills, develop compassion. When you're, talking with people, when you're discussing with people, don't look at them in terms of what the society describes them as. Don't label them already. You know, look at people the way they are without labels. So if there's an extremely rich man, that's the only person I will give respect to, as opposed to if I see a beggar. That's not how we should be. We should have evolved. If you can respect a beggar the same way you would respect an Ambani, for that matter, at least when you see them, you don't distinguish between both of them. I think you are way up there in the chain of evolution, really. Um, it's very hard to do, very easy for me to say, very hard to do. But if you take an ordinary example, like if I distinguish somebody, two neighbors are there, one neighbor is doing extremely well, the other is not that well off. Am I able to treat both of them the same way without distinguishing too much between the two? That, I think, is my distinguishing factor as a human being. So, understand from one human being to another, each one can have their own compulsions, each one can have reason why they say certain things, why they behave a certain way. That doesn't mean you have to tolerate bad behavior. Okay, nobody gets paid to tolerate bad behavior. That's a different story altogether. What I'm saying is, if in your remit you can execute a little empathy, if you can execute a little sympathy, even at times, and there's a distinct difference between the two, that'll be great. That'll be great. If you can step into somebody's shoes and, understand what they're feeling at that point. For example, if somebody comes up to me and says, oh, I can understand somebody has died in your family, but what about that milestone? I need you to complete that milestone within the next 24 hours. That's really very poor example of empathy. They will say, I empathize with you, but they will expect you to complete some deadline even if somebody has died in your house. So that absolutely doesn't make sense to me. That's the most unempathetic and what do you call it, brainless behavior I've ever seen. People can execute. Move away from that. Start feeling more. The feeling questions we don't ask more. We ask, what is the color of the car? We don't ask, what is the motivation behind you purchasing that car? So ask feeling related questions, because they help a lot, even in transactions. 95% of what we do is transaction. 5% is people skills, right? But that 5 people is enough to collapse your entire business of 95%. And this was taught to me by a finance guy. Focus on that 5%, Anupama, because it's your people and goodwill that is going to come in handy, is what he always told me. So I've taken that very seriously. I go by that, really.
Actually, your answers and point of view help me as well as my young watchers who are watching this right now.
I'm glad.
Thank you, Dr. Anupama Hariharan, to join us tonight.
Yeah.
And best of
Thank you.
luck with all your books.
Mm-hmm.
We are very excited to see them on. I mean, I am very excited to see Lara on big screen.
Yeah.
So thank you
Thank you
tonight.
so much. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me here. And I'm glad if people have takeaways from our podcast today. I'm looking forward to it. All right. And thank you for being such a wonderful host. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. We are ending this live here. Thank you for watching everyone.